Jesper Bratt represented the New Jersey Devils in Toronto for the All-Star Game festivities, and I need to give him more recognition for doing so. And let's talk about some potential trade rumors for the Devils involving the Calgary Flames, a team that they're set to play later tonight. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. So, when this episode goes live, the New Jersey Devils are set to take on the Calgary Flames. However, on the day that I'm actually recording this episode, the Devils had an off day. And I figured, what better way than to kick off Flames and Devils than to talk about a potential trade package for Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom. So that will be for segment 2. And then in segment 3, we'll talk about some already departure Devils players and why the Devils had to move on from them over the summer, because I see it in my comment section all the time. Why did the Devils move on from Damon Severson? Why did they move on from Ryan Graves? Because now their blue line is inexperienced and they're struggling mightily. Well, I'll save that for the third and final segment once again. But to jumpstart today's episode, I want to give credit to Jesper Bratt and what his all-star appearance means for not only his career, but the Devils organization. Now, on the day that Jesper Bratt was announced an all-star and set to replace Jack Hughes in it, it was overshadowed by other big news involving the Devils organization, because that was the same day in which Michael McLeod and Cal Foote were officially charged with sexual assault, and they surrendered themselves to the police. Now, I did an emergency episode on the matter because I said that what was going on in London, Ontario, and what was going on with Jesper Bratt, they were two big news topics to not do an episode on. So once again, I did an emergency episode. And sometimes I go back on certain episodes and I read the comment section, and someone left a comment saying that it's such a shame that Jesper Bratt, a former 6th round pick and is now being named an all-star, got overshadowed by Michael McLeod and Cal Foote for being big pieces of you know what. And I see where that person is coming from, but the reality of it is that some news topics take priority over others. And that was a news discussion that unfortunately it was for a very bad reason, but it was big news. So I obviously had to take that as a priority. But I still want to give credit to Jesper Bratt, because him being named an all-star and participating in the festivities in Toronto, it means a lot for not only himself, but the Devils in general. So Jesper Bratt this season, he has 20 goals, 32 assists for a grand total of 52 points. So the one thing I love to hammer on home when talking about Jesper Bratt is just the overall narrative of how he has gotten to this point, because here's a former 6th round draft pick, and I don't think the Devils had that high of expectations for him. And quite honestly, I don't think people had high expectations for him in general, because we don't usually see 6th round draft picks becoming all-stars, but that's exactly what happened for Jesper Bratt. So the big talking point for Jesper is that he's been severely underrated. So riddle me this. The Devils broke the franchise record last season for most wins. And this isn't a franchise, with all due respect, similar to the Arizona Coyotes that have no Stanley Cup pedigree. No, this Devils team has its fair share of history, how they changed the game. They arguably had the best goalie of all time in Martin Brodeur. So this is a franchise that was accustomed to winning in the mid-90s and early 2000s. So it was just like they broke the franchise record last season, albeit they only reached the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But it goes to show you that this Devils team was really good. But getting back on track, they broke the franchise record for most wins in a single season with 52, but yet they only had one all-star representative in Florida, and that was Jack Hughes. Now, people were making the argument saying that it should have been Nico Hischier or Jesper Bratt joining Hughes in Florida, and that whole fan vote thing is just so broken, because the Devils are, unfortunately, while they are a Stanley Cup pedigree organization, they're also a small market team. So they're going to get overshadowed by teams in Canada. They're going to get overshadowed by the Boston Bruins, New York Rangers, maybe even the Islanders to a sense, because more people pay attention to those New York-based teams than the New Jersey-based team, even though the Devils are very close to New York. But digressing a little bit, I think we can all agree, like, we saw it on full display when the fan vote came into factor, because the players that nudged their way into the All-Star game via the fan vote were either a part of the Vancouver Canucks or the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Jesper Bratt didn't really stand that much of a chance, despite having a cult following on social media. But going back to what I was saying, the Devils were too good last year to only have one representative. So Jesper Bratt, while his numbers did go down in the month of December last year, he was still a very vital player on the Devils roster. So I think Nico Hischier deserved the All-Star bid over him, but I still think he should have gotten some more consideration. And the same can be said for this season, albeit Jack Hughes has missed some significant time, but Bratt is still leading the Devils in points with 52. And he plays a similar game to Jack Hughes, which is he likes to get off and running. He likes to make those breakout passes. He loves to score. He's a bona fide scorer, because for someone like Nico Hischier, Hischier is a pass-first type of player. He likes to set up his teammates. He likes to be that glue piece for Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt, because whoever's on his line, he knows that Jack Hughes or Jesper Bratt, they're more likely to score over him, and he's perfectly content with that, because Hischier's job is to play two-way. But my thing is, like, Jesper Bratt deserves more recognition. He deserved more attention, and I think that was very evident amongst the Devils discourse, which is Jesper Bratt is just very underrated. And I said, if he was ever named to the All-Star game, then I think that can break that narrative of him being underrated. Now, how does this help the Devils is that it kind of solidifies that the Devils are a legitimate team, because they have 5 All-Stars on their roster. Dougie Hamilton, Timo Meier, albeit Hamilton and Meier were All-Stars prior to joining the Devils. So take it how you want to take it. I still count them as All-Stars because they have appeared in the All-Star game before. But Devils players that represented New Jersey in the All-Star game, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, and Jack Hughes, the original Big Three, if you would. So I think it solidifies that one day, just one day, similar to last year, the Devils will be a legitimate powerhouse in the NHL. They have a lot of talent, and the numbers show it. They have a lot of All-Stars on their roster. So if they could stay healthy and if they can maybe get some better defense or get a goalie on the down low, we'll see what happens. But I just wanted to say, like, this Devils team, don't underestimate them. They have plenty of All-Stars on their rosters. Now, the last thing I want to bring up is that I think this is good for Jack Hughes as well, because now maybe Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt, in terms of scoring, can be a good dynamic duo in the league. Because some dynamic duos that come to mind are people like in Edmonton, like look at Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, or if you want to go back a few years, look at Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane when they were on the Chicago Blackhawks, not the Detroit Red Wings, the Chicago Blackhawks, because they ran the league for a while. Or maybe Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov, or the Devils just saw these two players, Mikko Rantanen and Nathan McKinnon. I can go on and on. There's a lot of dynamic duo players in the league. Or in Pittsburgh, Malkin and Crosby, because both of them are former Hart Trophy winners, or people consider Jake Guentzel and Sidney Crosby to be the dynamic duo. But nonetheless, you get the point that there's a lot of talent in the NHL. There's a lot of 1-2 punches. And why can't Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes be one of those 1-2 punches down the road? So they're not there yet. They're not on that same platform. They're still relatively young, but both of them obviously have a decent amount of years under their belt. So I think they're heading in the right direction. So that's what I want to see Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt do. Okay, so both of them are all-star players. Build off of it. Become one of the best duos in the league one day, because I think they have potential to do so, because they both play a similar game. So I think Jack Hughes, he's already solidified himself as one of the best players in the NHL, because when NHL Network did their player rankings going into the season, he came in at number 11. So he's creeping in on that sort of pedigree, but he still has a lot of work to do, and it begins with staying healthy. But he has a very bright future. He's still in his early 20s. And for Jesper Bratt, he's now an all-star, and take it how you want to take it, he's one of the best players in the NHL. So I know there's this joke on X saying like he's the best player in the NHL, but I'll say he's one of the best players in the NHL now that he participated in an All-Star game. And I don't know how much players actually care about the All-Star game. I think it's titular at this point, but it's still an honor to be named one of the best of the best. and be representing your organization. So it took a while, it took some luck, but Jesper Bratt being named an All-Star, I think it carries a lot more weight going forward for New Jersey. So we're going to talk about potential trade rumors involving the Flames momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. So happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways that you can end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get a $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, let's talk about Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom once again. So if you want to hear my opinions on the Devils possibly acquiring both Markstrom and Tanev, I will leave links in the description to those respective episodes because I don't want to repeat myself. This is sort of an update as to what's going on in the whole trade rumor circulation. According to JP Gambatis of the Hockey Writers, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, he said, Friedman on 32 Thoughts today that the Devils are unsurprisingly looking for a center. Also mentioned that they are not interested in Flames Chris Tanev because he's a rental. So for reference, Chris Tanev is in the final year of his 4-year, $18 million deal, and his cap hit is $4.5 million. So that's something we'll talk about momentarily, but let's address the first half of what JP said. And Friedman is saying that the Devils are looking for a center because they lost the center in Michael McLeod. Now, I'm just trying to explain from the perspective of the Devils. Here's what Michael McLeod brought to the team. He was good in the faceoff department. Obviously, he was stepping up his game offensively, and he was pretty decent on the defensive side of things as well. So he was a player that played the full 200 sheet of ice. So losing Michael McLeod, the Devils lost an energizer. And let me be perfectly clear. I am not defending Michael McLeod. I think his days as a Devil and in the NHL period are pretty much outnumbered. So I hope justice is served as to what happened with that 2018 Team Canada squad. So just putting that out there, I'm just trying to give you guys a perspective as to why the Devils might be looking for a center because there's obviously a decent void to fill. Now, the Devils were pretty good in the faceoff category in their previous matchup against the Avalanche, but the main question is, can they maintain it? Because winning the faceoffs is very vital if you want possession of the puck, and we all know that. But I think that's why the Devils are looking for a center. But my overall opinion on this is that I don't think that should be a priority. I think you can replace Michael McLeod in a sense because one of the players that I have my eyes set on is Tomas Nosek, who recently returned to the Devils lineup. I've told you guys a few episodes in the past that he is pretty good in the faceoff department. He brings a little bit of physicality, and I think he could be a decent replacement for McLeod. Same could be said for Chris Tierney. Chris Tierney scored in the previous game against the Avalanche. So we'll see what happens in that sort of aspect, but I don't think that should be a big priority because the Devils have a couple of good centers in Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier because both of them are all-star players, and Dawson Mercer could play center if you want him to, but I think he's better suited at a winger position, let's be completely honest. But my thing is, like, I think it's replaceable, and I think with Jack Hughes coming back, it's definitely going to get a little bit better in that sort of category. So I'm not really the biggest fan of Tom Fitzgerald searching for a center, if I'm being completely honest, but that's my 2-cent opinion on it. I know trade circulations can be subjective, but I just think for what the Devils need right now, I don't think the center position should be a main priority for them. Now, my thing is, like, look for a defenseman because the Devils need more experience on their blue line. They need a little bit more physicality. They need to improve in their block shots a little bit. And so I'm just like, maybe if you get a defenseman, maybe that can help things. And if you can get a goalie on the down low, okay, maybe you can look at that as well. And when looking at the second half as to what Elliot Friedman said on the recent episode of 32 Thoughts, I don't know how I feel about the Devils not pursuing Tanev just because he could be seen as a rental. Well, honestly, I think he would be a decent rental, and maybe you can fix it during the offseason because would he resign with the Devils long-term? Most likely not, but here's the thing. If no one is like picking up the phone lines, if no one is really trying to pursue Tanev, then why not pursue after him? Because the thing is like, this is what you do if you're trying to contend, if you're trying to get yourself into the playoffs. You usually got to take risk on that, even if it is for a few month rental. And the asking price might not be all that high, but let's look at a trade package courtesy of Stan Fischler of the Hockey News, which, by the way, welcome back, Stan. I know it's been a while. I know this news was already announced, but it seems like everyone on the Devils discourse enjoys your work. So he put out in a recent article and said that one rumored Devils Flames deal would have Devils getting defenseman Chris Tanev and goalie Jacob Markstrom for Devils forward Alexander Holtz and a first rounder in the 2024 draft. Now, if you're a little confused as to how the draft picks work for the Devils, so they own their first round pick in this year's draft, but their second round pick, they gave it away to the Sharks in the Timo Meier deal. And the second round pick is a conditional 2024 second round pick, courtesy of Puckpedia. So if you needed some more insight on that, because I know it gets a little confusing. But anyway, when looking at that trade package, it does kill two birds with one stone. So the Devils do get Chris Tanev, and then they also get Jacob Markstrom. So the thing is like, this is what people might want, just because it's like the Devils get another goalie and then they get some more depth on the defensive side of things, because we've been having this debate. What's wrong with the Devils? Is it their defense? Is it their goaltending? I said I don't think it's pick or choose. I think it's a matter of like what's easier for Tom Fitzgerald to obtain. But in this case, it's just like, I don't know how I feel about parting ways with Alexander Holtz, because the thing is like Chris Tanev, he might be a rental. And for Jacob Markstrom, how many more years of good service can he provide for the Devils? And how many more good years of service can Alexander Holtz potentially give the Devils? Because am I open to trading away Holtz? Yes, but for the right price. And I'm a little thickety on this, because it's like, yes, the Devils get more depth defensively with Chris Tanev, but for Jacob Markstrom, and I think that would be the main seller for Devils fans, it's just like he has a few years left on his contract. He's 34 years of age. So do you see the Devils winning the Stanley Cup within the next few years? That would have to be the big discussion, because that's the huge risk if you trade away Alexander Holtz, because I have no doubt in the back of my mind, if Alexander Holtz goes to a team like the Flames, he's going to see great success, similar to what's happening with Yegor Sharangovich, because he's going to be given a much bigger role. He's going to be used as a priority. The Flames will give him a much longer leash so he can afford to make those mistakes, or he can make those turnovers or bad pass attempts, and the Flames will forgive him a little quicker because they want to develop him. So the Devils, it's just like they want to win now, so they can't afford for Holtz to make some of the blunders he makes, but albeit I think he deserves a few more minutes, because everyone's going to make mistakes now and again, but that's a discussion for another time. But the thing is like, I like Chris Tanev's game, and I think Jacob Markstrom would be decent, but it's just like trading away Alexander Holtz. I don't know how good of an investment that is on the Devils' end, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying that I don't want those two players. I just don't know about trading away Alexander Holtz, because I think Holtz has a huge amount of upside, and I think every team in the league can see that. So if he's given a bigger opportunity elsewhere, then he's really going to thrive, if you ask me. Will he be a star player? Probably not, but I think he'd be a very useful player. So that's the only risk I see in this whole ordeal. So we'll see what happens, but just keep in mind, like I said, Chris Tanev, final year of his contract. Jacob Markstrom still has a few years left on his deal, but he's 34 years of age. So it's just like, how much of a good investment do you think the Devils will get in that sort of deal, especially with Alexander Holtz, who is still very young in his early 20s and can give years and years and years of good service to the Devils or another team if he is dealt away. So just some food for thought. And I know some people were a little hesitant about including Holtz in trade packages involving Timo Meier. So I'm just saying, like, I'm just going based off of past experience, and maybe Fitzgerald will find a way to get both those players without having to sacrifice someone like Alexander Holtz. It would be very difficult, but we'll see what happens. Now, we're going to close out today's show and talk about some already departed players on the Devils roster and why the Devils had to let them go. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Sleeper. So regardless of where the Devils are at in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily hockey contests. So you don't just have to participate in daily fantasy hockey. You can also participate in NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, all on Sleeper. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. So to win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Devils fans. You're going 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Okay, I see this all the time. When the Devils have a bad outing defensively, I see a lot of people saying, like, why did the Devils give up on Ryan Graves? Why did they give up on Damon Severson? Why couldn't they have re-signed those players? Well, I'm here to answer that question because it's somewhat of a slow news day for the Devils, and I figured that this is a good opportunity to answer that question because it is a good question. Because the thing is like I said early on in the episode, the Devils are struggling with block shots, and I believe Ryan Graves led the Devils in block shots last year. Damon Severson, his offensive numbers went down a bit, but he was still vital on the bottom 4 defensive role for Devils, which is why he suited up in 81 of the 82 potential games. Or someone like Miles Wood, he definitely brings some physicality. And people are also wondering, why didn't the Devils try to pursue Tomas Tatar? Well, here's the thing. The fact of the matter is that the Devils just couldn't afford Damon Severson anymore, because you guys need to remember that the 2023 free agent class was a very weak class. So someone like Damon Severson, he was going to get paid big time, because Damon Severson might have been a bottom 4 defenseman for the Devils, but he is still a capable top 4 defenseman. Now, he does make some boneheaded plays, but he really stepped up his game defensively last year once again. So my thing is, like, Tom Fitzgerald did try to re-sign Damon Severson, but ultimately he said, I don't think I'm going to be able to afford you. The Devils pulled off the second sign and trade in NHL history, and Severson signed an 8-year, $50 million deal with the Devils on June 9th, 2023, but he was immediately dealt to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and the Devils got a 3rd-round draft pick out of it. So do you think the Devils could have afforded to keep Severson around for 8 years at $50 million? No, Severson knew he was going to be very vital in the open market. It was the first time in his career that he was a UFA. So he had to take advantage of the opportunity. So the Devils just couldn't afford him. So, and Tom Fitzgerald acknowledged it. Same could be said for Ryan Graves. Ryan Graves signed a 6-year deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Ryan Graves is very good, and I loved him on the Devils roster the last few years. He was very vital. I like to call him the silent but deadly ninja, because some of the stuff he didn't show up in the score sheet. He was good in plus minus. He was good in blocks. He was good in offensive and defensive point shares. But the thing is, once again, similar to Damon Severson, Devils just couldn't afford him. And he was going to get paid once again, and he got paid by a divisional rival. So they couldn't keep him around, so they lost some experience on their blue line, but there was nothing the Devils could really do. It was like they had to make that sacrifice, because keep in mind, they still had to re-sign Jesper Bratt to an extension. They still had to re-sign Timo Meier to an extension. So they had to make some tough decisions, and the tough decision was to let Damon Severson and Ryan Graves walk. So it wasn't a matter of the Devils just got tired of them and they just said, like, get out of here, get out of town. No, it was just like, it was a weak free agent market, and Severson and Graves took advantage of an opportunity, and I applaud them for it. And for Tomas Tatar, the thing is like, once the Devils got Tyler Toffoli, their chances of getting Tatar back, slim to none, because there was no room for Tatar to slide in comfortably, because the only spot open was a bottom 6 role that Alexander Holtz already had occupied. So the Devils got Toffoli added to the roster. He's going to be automatically added to the top 6. So you got players like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Timo Meier, Jesper Bratt, Dawson Mercer, and now Toffoli added. No room for Tomas Tatar. Then on the bottom 6, Andre Palat, Eric Haula, Curtis Lazar, Nathan Bastian, Michael McLeod, Alexander Holtz. So it was getting filled up rather quickly. So Tomas Tatar, unfortunately, he was nudged out of town, and he acknowledged that on a podcast that he appeared on in August, I believe. So when I see those comments saying like, why did the Devils move on from them? If the Devils could, they would have re-signed all those players to like very cheap deals. But the reality of it is they couldn't afford them. They had to make some tough decisions, and those were the tough decisions that were made. So I hope that clears the air a little bit. I know this was a brief segment, but it was a simple explanation, which was Devils just couldn't afford them. And that's just how the roster shapeshifted. Obviously, they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, so some of those players haven't played in all the games up to this point. But that's just where the Devils are at right now. So leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on podcast streaming service. Hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4, or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. Do you want to see Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev added onto the roster? Are you willing to part ways with Alexander Holtz? And what did you think about Jesper Bratt being named an All-Star? And what's this going to do for his career? So leave a comment down below once again, or hit me up on X and ask for today's episode. That's what I'm going to have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.